Like all Christians, Peter's healing takes place by passing through the grave of Jesus Christ. John tells us that, although he arrived at the tomb first, he waited for Peter and allowed him to go in first, indicating Peter's leadership among the apostles, a leadership that was granted to him following his confession, first among the apostles, that Jesus was indeed the Messiah, the Son of the living God. In response, Jesus had renamed Simon Peter, saying, "Upon this rock I will build my church." However, Peter could only be the rock of the church in communion with him who is the one foundation and cornerstone of the church, Jesus Christ. It is here, in the rock-hewn tomb of Jesus, that Peter's relationship with Jesus begins to be repaired precisely so that Peter can live his missional identity as the rock of the church. Upon entering the tomb, John tells us that Peter saw the burial cloths there, and the cloth that had covered his head, not with the burial cloths, but rolled up in a separate place. Why does John include these details? Because these details suggest that Mary's report might be incorrect. If people had stolen Jesus' body, it is unlikely that they would unwrap the body first. And if they did, it is very unlikely that they would have rolled up the cloth that covered Jesus' head and placed it apart from the rest of his burial cloths. If they did take the cloths off, they would have just flung them down anywhere. But this is not what happened here. These signs indicate that what has taken place here has been done intentionally and carefully, that something not so nefarious is at work. Thus, John continues in verse 8 to tell us that he then entered the tomb after Peter, and he saw and believed. The word John uses here is rooted in the Greek pistis, the word we normally translate as faith. Most basically, the word pistis means trust. What Peter and John see moves them to trust that something more than they understand is at work here. The subsequent verse indicates that they did not have full faith in the resurrection of Jesus at this moment, for John tells us they did not yet understand the scripture that he had to rise from the dead. Nevertheless, Peter and John have the beginnings of faith, for they hold to a trust that something greater than them is at work here, which they will learn more fully about in the coming days. But Peter and John have begun to experience the first glimmer of salvation. They have felt the first caresses of healing, precisely because they ran to the tomb of Jesus Christ, the incarnate Son of God. While the two apostles ran to the tomb because of love, they now emerge with the beginnings of faith and a new reason to hope. The healing of both their minds and wills, which were darkened by sin and the absence of Jesus just before the sun rose, has thus begun. For the theological virtue of faith perfects the intellect, while the virtue of hope perfects the will. And while they don't as yet understand the faith they have, nor do they know where their hope ought to be directed, they trust that God is still at work through his incarnate Son, Jesus Christ, the one in whom they placed their hope long ago, and out of their intense love for, ran to the tomb that day.